now streaming live on custom live stream. So we are live. Hooray. So I told you guys that we're going to have a legend here. And he's a legend because he's hosted over 100. It's probably close to 500 now, but I know he has helped millions of people host live events. And we have with us none other than Benjamin Dale of Hey Summit.
Well, thank you. But when you said legend, I was saying, well, who else is coming? I mean, when are they arriving? That sounds fantastic.
It's you, and I'm happy to have you here. Thank you for being here
Happy to
with
be here.
us.
Pleasure.
So, please let us know more about yourself. Let us know more about Hey Summit. All the things that you've been telling me behind stage, I know other people want to
Well,
know too.
Erica, thank you for inviting me along, and it's wonderful to meet so many of you here and those on the replay. So yeah, I'm Ben. I'm the founder, CEO at Hey Summit. Hey Summit is essentially an all-in-one platform that helps you do all the nitty-gritty that's required to put together, but also crucially execute and deliver an impactful event. We used to say deliver an impactful virtual event, but actually we support in-person and also hybrid events now as well. But for the vast majority, quite frankly, we're really talking virtual events, and our platform is there to help you do that. And we've been around for sort of coming up to 8 years. And as Erica mentioned, we've helped millions of attendees sort of consume and watch amazing content out there, ranging from everything you can imagine. We are, our customers are truly diverse, and that's fantastic. And it keeps us on our toes in terms of features that they require and everything else. And our goal really is to make sure that the platform that you're using to run that event, Hey Summit, is the glue that really just enables you to deliver that impactful event without the stress, without the time sink that can quite often go into these things. And so yeah, on this talk today, I thought we'd sort of split it into sort of thirds. We'll do a little bit of an intro on kind of virtual events and some of the pitfalls you might fall into if you're not careful, some of the little tricks that you can do to make yours a little bit more impactful if you're at that stage of kind of looking to run one. We'll do a bit of a demo for the second segment, and then we'll pass it over to a bit of a Q&A as well. So if you do have any questions, pop them into, what's the normal protocol here, Erica? Into the chat, I guess, or the Q&A section if there is one. I'm not sure, but in one of those places, we'll keep an eye on it. But also, I think more pertinently, Erica mentioned that a large number of you are going to be quite well versed already in running events, either for yourselves or for other people. And so it would be great, actually, while I'm talking, while I'm rabbiting away, just for you to just pop into the chat kind of any common problems you sort of face or questions that you have ahead of schedule before I start doing the demo, any tidbits about your experiences running an event. And if I can, I will try and kind of just tailor that into the demo portion or any portion of it, really, just to make it that little bit more impactful for those that happen to be watching it live. So with that said and done, let's head over to the slides. I'll just share my screen and then we'll head over to there. And Erica, if you can just let me know if you can see this okay.
Yes, looks fine.
Perfect. Cool. So what are we going to cover today? Well, and again, bearing in mind that I appreciate we've got a range of experiences here. So I'm going to cover the basics very quickly, and it's really just to get us all onto the same page, I suppose. But we're going to look at what is a virtual event, the benefits running one, the challenges if you're not careful, why it matters and some of the global trends, some tips and tricks for community growth, a bit of a live demo, as I mentioned, and then we'll wrap it up with a Q&A. So what is a virtual event? I think this seems like one of those, well, why have it in there? It's not self-descriptive in the title. We all know what one is. And yet, actually, I would question whether we do. I think a lot of folk that jump onto our platform do so a little bit hesitantly, maybe a little bit later than they would have previously done, because they get this impression that because of the word event in virtual event means that it needs to be this big, all-encompassing, clever, complex, meaty thing that spans multiple days and has the very best speakers speaking, and this sort of cornerstone event that sort of you can sort of look at over the previous years and go, that was fantastic. And yet the reality, even though it can be that of course, is that it can be everything in between. It can be something as simple as a one-off, I suppose in many ways, a single webinar can be a version of an event, and it's something that we call an ongoing series where you sort of drop a single webinar once a week, and so it becomes a rather than a contained sort of event over a few days, you sort of spread it out indefinitely and you just drop a session weekly. It could be a single day event, but with multiple talks. It could be a multi-day event with multiple talks. It doesn't even have to have multiple speakers. And so I think the first thing to frame what we talk about here is to kind of unshackle yourselves from the perception, the expectation that your event needs to be, or let's reframe that every event that you do needs to be this sort of crazy, big, impactful, huge, complex, clever, best speaker kind of affair. And actually, it can be everything in between, and it's yours to kind of craft and crucially get right for your audience. So different types of audiences will prefer different types of events. And part of, I think, what we should be doing as practitioners in this space is people putting on events, that is experimenting with our audience, what resonates both in terms of topic, but also format. So what does that mean in terms of what are some of the options that we have to play around with here? Well, it could be an online event, as I mentioned before. It can be an in-person event. So that's where you've got a physical space. And more, actually, I'm seeing a lot more people doing these in-person events where, again, with that sort of thinking or philosophy of it not needing to be a big, clever event where you're hiring out, a big theatre, or it doesn't need to be clever like that. A lot of folk are actually doing in person, but just in a cafe or in a local hall or a community hall or something like that. Something that for most cases is actually completely free from a venue standpoint. So yeah, just quite cool. You can sort of do that in person as well. And then of course you can do hybrid, which is you've got an in-person portion and then maybe the replays are online, or maybe you have a live in person that is also streamed. So it's online for people who can't attend. So different ways of slicing that, which is quite cool. And as I mentioned, it could be single day, multi-day, single speaker, multi-speaker. And you're also working out here and asking yourself, well, what is the goal here with your event? Is it to generate revenue? It seems obvious when you first think about it, but for a lot of people, it's not. And it shouldn't be that, I don't think, the first thing that you think about. And in many ways, I would encourage you never to think, well, not never, but not to think about that in your first events, because really, I think it starts with community and building that, either building from scratch if you're starting from point zero, or nurturing and growing the existing community that you have. Revenue will then follow, whether it's directly from ticket sales from the event or whether it's from follow-up sort of sales, upsells, getting them onto your course, selling a product, whatever it happens to be. But I think starting from a point of, well, let's see if we can grow revenue first. Sorry, community first, I think is the key piece there. And also bearing in mind that an effective event does that with the community, but also thinks about it from a content marketing play as well. Don't forget that. And it's easy to forget. So I'll give you a bit of slack here, I suppose, but it's easy to forget once you've produced the event that what you have at the end of that, apart from hopefully a bit of money and some extra traction with leads and community, etc., what you have is some meaningful content. It's really easy to forget this. When you write a blog, it's very obvious that you have a blog post at the end of that, and then you go out there and market it over your socials, and you publish it, Google will consume it through their sitemap and blah, blah, blah. And it's part of your marketing strategy. And yet when we finish an event, we have more. We haven't just produced one blog post. We now have one, and I say blog post, it's vlog more so, but we have some video content with some text, maybe you've got some nice descriptions with it, the bios for the speakers, but we've now got one per speaker. So if you're putting on a 30 speaker event over a few days, you now have a wealth of content that is highly valuable, highly targeted to your audience. And so a lot of successful event organizers will carry on that content marketing snowball after the event has finished. And I think that's really worth thinking about. So an event can be a pure kind of community building thing. It can be a revenue generation thing. It can be part of your wider brand recognition or content marketing play. Lots of things to do there. And of course, when it comes to revenue, the strategy and the way that you sell tickets, there's a lot to play around with there as well. And so hopefully this just sort of helps sort of signal that one person's event compared to someone else's event could be vastly different. So don't get tied up too much with this expectation that it needs to be a big, huge, clever, sort of grand stage sort of affair. Start small and then grow and develop from there based on feedback. So preaching to the crowd here, but benefits of a virtual event, what do they look like? Well, we're going to increase reach and accessibility. And what I mean by that is that it is by definition, if we're doing the virtual rather than in person, we are able to reach, theoretically at least, a much wider crowd. In fact, we have almost no geographical sort of limitations, which is great. Now, you might want to impose some and say, look, this is only for people in Connecticut or people in London, or, if you're doing a slightly more sort of geographical centric kind of sell or pitch. But generally speaking, you can sort of cross those borders, and that's fantastic. And accessibility is a key piece as well. People who previously would have wanted to have come to your event if it was in person, but just never could because either they physically couldn't, they can't, they're unable to sort of walk or hear or listen or whatever the disability is, or they just physically, it just doesn't make sense for them to cross the country for effectively a half-day event or something along those lines. So you're really increasing your chances of getting in front of more people. It's obviously cost effective for you and the attendee, and it's just got flexibility baked in by design. The fact that it is on demand, or at least a portion of it can be on demand. And again, there's different ways of delivering the event. I probably should have mentioned in the previous slide, it can be live, it can be pre-recorded, it could be a combination of those. And so you've got some interesting things to play around with there. But at the very least, you'll have some on-demand replay access at the end of it, most likely. And not forgetting that one of the huge unsung heroes of a virtual event, especially when you use a platform like Hey Summit, is the data that you can pull out of it at the end to really learn what you're going to be doing. Now, this is great, but not really that useful if you're only ever going to do one event. And I would argue that if you're only ever going to do one event, you're missing out on a huge opportunity. And that's to learn from that previous event to then inform the next event. And this could be from basic traffic sort of insights, conversion rates, and what sort of copy works the best and everything else, right through to if you're asking particular questions during registration to sort of understand and segment your audience. It's a way to kind of understand the demographic makeup of your audience. And again, this can really help inform what you do there. And one thing I love to see in some Hey Summit reports, and we'll look at some of these in the demo portion, is to actually see which talks people attended more than others, which ones were popular in other words. And this is fantastic because I don't care what it is, what business it is, what industry it is, whether it's an event, whether it's whatever it is, we will have our own biases as the founder, as the leader, as the person delivering it, whatever that happens to be. And so we will start an event going, this is the talk that excites me, and I'm excited to get that great person talking there, and this is the one I want to push, and this is why people are going to be coming to my event because of this one talk. And yet you might look at the data afterwards and realize that, yeah, it had some people watching it, but actually most people watched this talk over here, that you maybe had no sort of inclination or sort of guess that would have been a popular one. So this data, if you take the time to kind of look at it afterwards, can be really, really powerful. But not to say that there aren't some challenges, as with everything. So we need to be careful about how we execute an event. We need to think about, and a lot of this is to do with just understanding your audience, which kind of just highlights how important it can be to kind of understand that data and those insights so that your second and third event can be that much more impactful. Because certain topics, certain styles of engagement, certain styles of interaction will work better with certain audiences. If your audience is sort of over 50, that's going to be a very different style of delivery than if your audience is under 20, for example. And so you need to understand and know your audience before you can kind of then craft the perfect event. And we need to be careful also just about basic content overload. I've seen a lot of people do this where, and myself included, the very first event that I put on before Hey Summit was even a twinkle in my eyes, was a 100 speaker event spread out over 2 weeks. And it was fantastic. To be fair, it was great fun, and it was a lot of cool content, and it was all live. It was exhausting because it was 100 speakers over that 2 week period. Every single one of those was live. And I suppose, although it kind of became the springboard to sort of Hey Summit being born, I think in reality it was probably a bit too much content, and I just thought it'd be kind of cool, kind of a bit sort of fun from a PR standpoint to do something that large. But it's just a reminder that technology is an enabler. It can really help you sort of superpower what you do. It can streamline processes, save costs, save time. But the dark side of that, if you're not careful, is that it tricks you into thinking you should be doing a hell of a lot more because you're saving all that time. And so suddenly now this is a 20 talk speaker event when really you could have done it with a 10 speaker event. It would have been less stress for you. It would have been more bite size for your audience, etc. So this is not to say that 20 is bad, 10 is good. It's just to say that keep yourself in check as you're building that event, and ask yourself whether the quality of what you're putting together here and the relevancy, if we go back to this sort of engagement and interaction and getting that right, is correct for your audience. And of course, putting it all together is complex, and that's primarily why we have Hey Summit here in the first place. You know, to sort of bring all these systems together so that you don't have to worry about joining up and linking Zoom and emailing and all the best practice sort of pricing strategies and all that sort of stuff. And then also pricing strategy, and this is one where the answer will only ever and can only really ever be it depends on a very high level. So if anyone has any particular questions or specific questions on pricing, I'm happy to go through them later. But at this stage, it is just a warning that you need to test pricing, and it's very easy to get pricing wrong. It's very easy to, I suppose, let's look at two extremes. On the one side, you might say this is an entirely free event because we want to remove those barriers, and we want, you know, as many people to come through the door as possible, and that's great. And actually, that will massively increase your conversion rates, anything up to sort of 50% conversion rates when people land on your landing page, on your Hey Summit landing page, which is fantastic. But then you're potentially leaving some money on the table, and so sometimes it's not the right word, lazy thinking, because we do free events as well. But at least just challenge yourself. Maybe do one free because that's your intuition, but maybe the next event, do a little test and even just £10, $10 for you know, extended replay access or something like that. Play around. Don't fall into the trap that it has to be one or the other. You can kind of do a blended approach. And then on the other side of the extreme, it can also be once you've convinced yourself that, and you're confident enough to start charging, because you're you know, hopefully you're confident in your content and the value that people are going to get. Try not to fall into the trap of setting it too high. That can also, you know, for obvious reasons, turn people off. Now, that's not to say that things shouldn't be high. It's just be careful that you're not doing it just for the sake of it. Try and balance it with a bit of data there. I've seen a huge number of events charge $1,000 plus, and they are killing it. They are actually absolutely bringing in a ton of money and creating really, really happy attendees because they're getting something totally unique, live. It's got that community sort of behind it as well. But where that works well is where the value proposition of the content that they're sharing is of a high level. Not to say it's a high standard, that would be the wrong way to frame it, but of a high sort of value in terms of, let's look at some examples where if you are a mechanic and you want to learn the nitty gritty, or let's say a rocket scientist, let's just make it really extreme, and you want to learn how to build a rocket. This is not something that you should expect to learn within a 10-minute free kind of session. It has inherent value. It has inherent complexity and depth that is going to require people to consume it over time, and not that, you know, it's very unlikely that people learning about rocket scientists or things that rocket scientists do, I suppose, that they would consume it back to back in that one day. It would probably be information overload. And so they are more likely to want to pay for the value of what they're getting and consume the on-demand replays over a week or two. And that's going to be hugely valuable for that type of audience. Whereas something that is a bit more sort of bite-sized and a bit more digestible, arguably you would have to really think about why you're charging those sorts of numbers in order to do that. So pricing obviously is really important. Just try not to fall into those one of those two traps there. And again, if there's any questions at all, please let me know. I need to do a bit more work on this slide, I must confess. So I'm just going to give you a sort of hands up. I need to flesh this out with a few more numbers. Looking at this when I was going through it this morning, I sort of realized that I hadn't sort of come back to it with additional stats, and I didn't want to just throw anything in there. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to do a bit of research and come back to folk afterwards. But there's a few trends here that we need to be aware of as in that sort of lean towards this being a really powerful marketing play to be thinking about in this day and age. And I'm actually going to start in the middle there. The work from home and the sort of movement that we've seen largely as a result of COVID. There's a lot of talk about that kind of springing back and folk sort of doing the hybrid sort of work from home approach during COVID, but then kind of going back and being attracted to going back to sort of office working afterwards. And actually, that's not what we've seen. We've ended up with something somewhat in the middle. And that's clearly, I think, going to be there to stay, not necessarily for all industries, but certainly for a large proportion. And what that effectively means, and why that's important for us talking about events and virtual events in particular, is that it's changed fundamentally the psychology of pretty much everyone that works from a computer from home. They are now so used to dialing into a Zoom call, and consuming content that way. They know what a replay is. They know how to watch something on demand. It's just so synonymous now with the way that we just do life, that we don't need to worry about it. Prior to COVID, you'd have to explain to people well, first of all, what Zoom is, then where to download it, and then how to download it, and then how to open it. Now you just say, I'm going to send the Zoom link. People know what Zoom is. They already have it installed fundamentally. They'll probably have it installed on multiple devices, and it's just ready to go. Now, there's multiple different ways to deliver content, and I'll show you that in the demo portion. It doesn't have to be Zoom, but I'm just using Zoom as that kind of sort of example there. And although we're kind of ending up in this sort of semi sort of work from home, semi sort of go back to sort of world, the same is happening for actual events as well. A lot of what were previously traditional bricks and mortar events at venues are now doing a mixture. Sometimes they'll do, or quite often they'll do their in-person still, but then they'll do an additional event that now is entirely online. And then others will do a blend where they'll continue doing their in-person events, but they'll now do a portion of it online, as a hybrid event. And that's something worth noting. And again, why is this important? Because this is what the market is doing. And as you know, your future attendees are consuming content like this already. And so they are very comfortable and in many ways expect to consume content in this way. And then, yeah, just a pithy kind of sort of stat up there. 93% of event marketers surveyed in a recent survey said that they intend to invest further into virtual events. Really just highlights that it's not just attendees and sort of the consumer, if you will, that is adapting their habits, but it is the professional person as well, and the commercial sort of outfit kind of thinking more seriously about how they make use of the power of a virtual event as part of their marketing strategy. So lots of things there to really think about, just to give us the confidence to go out there and start putting events on. So a few tips and tricks, and we'll cover some of these as well as some additional ones just as naturally as part of the demo. So this is not an exhaustive list. This is just a bit of a high level things that hopefully are a bit common sense, but some of the best pieces of advice shouldn't need huge amounts of explaining. They just need a reminder for us to kind of do that thing the next time. So I've broken this down into 3 sections: pre-event engagement, nurturing community, and then post-event follow-up. So pre-event, don't forget that it's your job to market, to tell people about your event. As good as a platform like Hey Summit might be in creating the event for you, or helping you create the event landing page and theming and payment processing and all the other things that we'll look at in a minute, once you've got your landing page up and ready, you need to tell people about it. There's only so much that a platform like Hey Summit can do. You need to at some point take the baton, nice little link up with the Olympics there if anyone's watching it, and actually take that forward and actually market it. So if you don't have a list already, definitely think about leveraging your speakers and affiliates. They are your most natural and most obvious advocates of your event. They're already bought in to why you're putting that event on and the audience you're talking to, especially with the speakers, and they will almost certainly have a list. And in most cases, almost without exception, I've probably seen just like 1 or 2 in my time, when you reach out to a speaker and ask them, they'll be more than happy to help you spread the word. Now, that's not to say that they will always do it. Human nature kicks in here, and it's all very well and good us saying, yeah, I would love to help you share that event. It's down to you as the organizer to nudge them, to give them the tools, the copy, to make it easy for them to actually share with their list. Even if they have a list of just 100 followers on Twitter, you still want them to do that. And so just make it easy for them, but don't forget that they are there to use. And then one other tip that I've seen people do recently is running in the lead up to your event taking place. Let's imagine it's taking place in 8 weeks' time. Do some, maybe just one, but maybe do a sequence of them. But in the run up, do some promo, single one-off webinars, nothing too in depth, but just like an introductory sort of thing. Think about it in an SEO sense. You'd have your sort of long tail and short tail kind of keywords. Think of it more like a bit of a long tail keyword that is top of funnel, just to sort of garner a bit of interest. It acts as a bit of a lead funnel for your event, because you can send people to sort of register for the event up to it. But it gets people interested in the topic as well, and it actually helps you test out a few of the things that you'll be talking about as well. It doesn't need to be anything more than something I'm doing right now, which is hopping on a webinar and just getting in front of a few people. And it doesn't even have to be scheduled too much in advance. If you have a following on LinkedIn, schedule a live event in the next couple of days, go live. Rough and ready is almost always the best approach, I think, with live. Feels more authentic. You're not reading off an auto cue or anything like that. It's just you going live. But it can be really powerful in the lead up to your event and can act as a bit of a promotion or promotional engine and sort of a stepping stone, if you will, to sort of get you close to that point and get those numbers through the door. And then during the event as well, and to a certain extent leading up to, nurture that community and think about engagement. So how are you going to deliver the sessions, the actual talks within the event? Is it live? Is it pre-recorded? Is it a combination? And what is your stick going to be during the actual talk itself? Are you going to make it friendly, jovial? Is it going to be serious? Think about the personality that you want to get across and how you're going to kind of create a relationship, albeit a distance one, with your audience. And then what are the tools? And these are the tools that you'll have available within Hey Summit, but things like polling, Q&A, chat, networking capabilities within your event as well, just to get people talking and to show them that something real is happening. Think about that. It can be the difference between someone just verbatim kind of consuming your content and someone kind of understanding it and walking away feeling complete, as though they've actually gained something more than just the words that you shared with them, but actually they've had some engagement that has just meant a bit more. It resonates a bit more. So really worth doing. And then the post-event follow-up, really easy to forget this. I do this myself sometimes. Don't forget to say thank you. Don't forget to send out that single, even if it's just a single email afterwards, don't forget to do it and ask for some feedback. Most people are more than happy to share it, especially if they didn't like the content, which sometimes happens. It was great, but that one speaker wasn't great. Not the speaker per se, but maybe the topic itself wasn't great. But in most cases, you'll find that people actually just love what you're doing. And this is one of the reasons why I love virtual events, is that it's quite difficult to get it wrong. And what I mean by that is that as long as you know your subject matter, let's just say it's let's say it's pets or something like that. It's very difficult to put on an event for people who also love pets that is not enjoyable, because by definition, the content you're putting on is to do with pets. It's a dog groomer or a vet or this, that, and the other. And it is naturally already in the wheelhouse of that audience. And so almost all the time, people walk away from these events going, that was really great. It was useful. It was informative. It was right on topic. But every now and again, it might not be. So get that feedback sent out there and let them know. And crucially, leading back to that content marketing play I was talking about before, don't forget to push the replays. The replays should, in my opinion, live on for quite a bit longer after the event has finished. If anything, because you can sell them. But that aside, just to give people the time to kind of consume them, but also to give you the time to turn it into a bit of a flywheel so that you can get more leads or more sales if you're charging for your event way after the event is finished. So don't forget, you've got multiple phases during your event. The bit when it's live, and that's when you make your initial money or your initial traction of leads. But then when it's finished, there's no reason why you can't be selling access to that event and the on-demand replays for months, if not years after that. It can become a really meaningful thing. And now imagine that you're doing a different event with a slightly different topic once a year, every 6 months, whatever happens to be. And now you've got multiple kind of flywheels, kind of all just working in the background, generating revenue, generating new leads, can be really, really powerful. And those are certainly some of the most impactful events I've seen along those lines. Okay, I hope that kind of covered a couple of new things, or things, maybe a couple of different ways that maybe you haven't thought about events before. But yeah, if there's any follow-up questions at all on anything I've just spoken about there, pop it in the chat, and I'll try and get to it at some point during this conversation. So let's pop over to the live demo portion now. And as I do that, and as I just switch the screens, if there's anything in particular that folk would like me to actually show during the demo portion itself, please let me know, because as you'll see, if you haven't used Hey Summit already, it's an incredibly feature-rich, mature platform that lets you do a huge amount of things. And so I'm not going to be covering everything. I'm going to cover the basics, although the most important parts. And so if there is anything in particular you want me to show, please do let me know. So Erica, I'm just going to swap my screen out. So just do some holding music or something like that. It'll be 2 seconds. Where's the elevator music when you need it?
I want to say that one of my favorite things about Hey Summit is that since I use it for a membership site, I like that I could upload short video clips of my members.
Yeah. That's a good idea.
And I also want people to know just because your event has ended, it doesn't mean that it's over, just because there's so many things you can do with repurposing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in fact, I'll remember to show you one of those things there. We have an evergreen feature as well, which is just another way of sort of reusing, sort of repurposing your content. Okay, so first of all, just for those that are there, just pop into the chat. Have you used Hey Summit before? Just be useful to get a show of hands in terms of familiarity, I suppose, with the platform. Be great. Oh, it's okay. Lovely to see you. I recognize a few names here, which is lovely. Okay, so we've got a few that have, a few that haven't. So good blend. Okay. So there are two areas to Hey Summit that you need to think about. There's the bits that you see, and there's the bits that everyone else sees. So the dashboard and the public-facing pages. So when I say public-facing pages, what we're really talking about are the marketing pages, so the landing page, the schedule page, a page for each speaker, for each talk, the registration pages, obviously, the payment processing, all of that stuff that is public facing is all that sort of side. And then the dashboard, which is what we're currently showing on the screen right now, is everything that you and your team sees. So everything from analytics through to the emails, through to setup, settings, sponsorship management, affiliate management, reporting, attendee management, and everything in between. So let's start off, I think, on the public facing parts. We'll just get a flavor, a feel for what an event can look like. And again, remembering what I was saying earlier on in those earlier slides, where one event compared to another event could be vastly different in terms of the quantity of talks, the number of days it's spanning, et cetera, et cetera. So just know that, you know, this is going to be like a standard sort of event, if you will, if such a thing exists, but there's different ways of slicing and dicing it. So we have two events here. One called the Creator Bootcamp, which is actually an event we ran ourselves last summer. And then we have the demo event, which is literally just a demo event with fictitious sort of content. But you'll see straight out the gate that they have very different looks and feels, different themes. And so this is a landing page, and this is all dynamic. It's all built for you. You can edit this to your heart's content if you want to. And this is just to give you a glimpse of things here. So we have speaker grids and sponsor grids and schedule, and call to actions and all that sort of thing. And that's just the landing page. And we can go in there if we want to edit that page. This won't be an explorative or an in-depth sort of view of this, but just to give you a flavor of some of the things that we can do. So we can go in here and edit this hero header here, and maybe let's change the graphic and let's do a sky. So you can search for royalty-free, commercial-free sort of imagery here. We can pop that in there and put that over there and maybe put it on the left instead. And so you can muck about and do, you know, a whole range of things. And, you know, you can go in there and edit the text, and you can drag and drop from our list of components. So we have these ready-built components that are just ready to drop in as you see fit. And you can just start from what I would recommend for most people is start from the default landing page that we give you and just edit as you go along, add things that you don't want, change the photos if you want to change a different photo. But actually, you don't have to. You can completely delete. I won't do it here, but you can just delete every single one and just literally start from a blank page and just start building it up and just dragging things on as you see fit there. So yeah, just know that there's a huge amount of control that you can do there. And just a heads up, for most people, this is where you will spend most of your time. And the reason for that is that apart from the landing page, pretty much everything else just builds itself automatically for you. You don't have to worry about it. So that speaker grid we looked at, if we go to the schedule page, that obviously it shows the schedule of upcoming talks, all of this stuff, you don't need to worry about updating it or anything else like that at all. Anything you do in the dashboard, whether you update the bio of a speaker or the link of a sponsor or the title or the date of it or a description of the talk, just automatically gets updated over here. So you don't even have to worry about it. Whereas with the landing page, it's kind of your canvas to kind of get your copy right and get your imagery right and get it on brand and everything else. And so, yeah, I do find that most customers will just spend a little bit more time here, rightly so, just to get it that little bit right. That being said, for the vast majority of people, I actually would ironically recommend against that, because it's tempting to go down the rabbit hole and to the nth degree kind of rip it to shreds and do this. And it's very easy with something that gives you so much control to make it look terrible. And obviously, it's in the eye of the beholder, of course, so do what you feel comfortable with. But if you're not usually the sort of person that would go in there and build your own landing page and everything else, I would generally recommend go with our default layout, which, by the way, this is the default layout, and just edit the text, change the photos, and just make it your own with that. And of course, we also have a theme editor as well. And this is a great way just to sort of add that splash of paint to the entire event, not just the landing page, but all of the public facing pages. So we can change fonts, we can change, brand colors and font sizes and everything, that loads of details that you can think of. So this is really actually where recommend that you start off, play around here, get the branding and the coloring and everything else right for you. And then if you need to, you can go in a bit more depth with your landing page if you feel confident. But just know that you don't have to. As long as you, change the text with your own, I think you'll be in a great place. And then, as I said, all of these other sections here will build themselves. So the schedule page builds itself. So we can go in there and we can look at a talk. Every talk has its own page, and this just gets built automatically. I'm just going to, and then so we have the title. We can see the speaker, description, sponsors. We can add to calendar. This is again just what the attendee would kind of tend to see. And you can choose on this talk page to either just show the title and the description like this and the sponsors, or you could have an intro video. So if you wanted to, and this will be public facing. So if you wanted to do a 30-second video reel to sort of get people excited about the content of the talk, you could do that as well. There's different ways of representing this here. But ultimately, we're just showcasing the event and the content to the audience. When the actual event goes live, depending on the tickets that the attendee has, they will then get to see the actual broadcast view of this talk or any of the other talks on your event, as well as obviously the replay views as well. But again, all dependent on the tickets and the ticket levels that you create. So you could have just the most simple of tickets, which is a free ticket that gives you access to everything, in which case everyone by definition will have access to everything if they register. Or you could have something where it's free for live broadcasts and then paid for the replays. And then that way, the attendees will only see what they're able to see at that point. So, and you can mix and match. There's a whole plethora of different ways to kind of structure that pricing in there. And I'll show you some of those things in a minute. So really what I'm going to do is, and by the way, every speaker, of course, has their own page as well. So we can go in here and look at Sophia. These are all just made up people. So if you happen to know this stock photo person and their name is not Sophia, don't be shocked. It's all random. But each speaker has their own page as well. And you can, of course, put intro videos on here as well, and a whole bunch of other things. But let's just go through now and register as an attendee. So I'm going to, and in fact, I'm going to do it on this one because I've got some custom questions on this one. So I'm going to go back to this one, and now straight away you'll see the look and feel is different, and it's very obvious that it is. And this is all just the theme, really. Just you can just tweak the theme and make it look and feel totally different, which is lovely. So I'm going to go in here now and register as an attendee, just to show you what a typical registration flow might look like, knowing, of course, that you can change much of what I'm showing here. So this first step here is asking us as the attendee to build my schedule. So to choose the talks that I want to add to my schedule. So I'm going to choose the topics that I care about. And in this event, we had a lot of topics. You might only have 2 or 3. And then I can choose my talks that I care about. And I'm building my schedule. Fundamentally, these are the talks that Hey Summit will then remind that attendee about before the event starts or before the talks go live. So an hour before, 20 minutes before, that sort of thing. Now, as the event organizer, you might not want attendees to pick and choose their own talks, which is perfectly fine. You can turn off that section and just have them enrolled into all of the talks if you want to. That's completely up to you. But all we're doing is just having them build their schedule. It's still the ticket that determines whether they can actually watch that content itself. So there is a distinction between things they add to their schedule to be reminded about versus whether they can fundamentally actually consume and watch that content. And that's all about the ticket. But in this particular demo, you'll notice that I didn't get to choose my ticket. It's done it for me because there's only one ticket in this particular event. Whereas over here, you can see there's a couple of different tickets. And so I can pick and choose, and I can go in there and choose what I want. So I'm just going to pop my email address in. And then you'll see that once it's validated the email, that there's a bunch of additional questions here that are completely custom. These are not mandatory. In fact, the only questions that we will ask as part of the platform kind of basics, if you will, email address and name. The rest is up to you. So most events will just ask those. And of course, any payment details if it's a paid ticket. But in most cases, I would recommend asking, as I was mentioning before, some demographic style questions. And the best ones, in my opinion, are those that are multi-choice by design. So multi-choice drop-downs, checkbox lists, always get tripped up on that one. And you can make them mandatory, optional, totally up to you. Really great way to get people to give quick answers without them having to think about it. So it's cool sometimes to give them a free text box, but actually in most cases I would recommend against it. But more importantly, for the reporting, I'll show you some of that in a minute, that we have on the back end that only really works properly with data fields like this for obvious reasons. We can't give you graphs on write an essay on so and so style questions. So that's it. I would then complete my order and I'm now in. Now, obviously, if this was a paid ticket, I would have to give my payment details at this point. And you could have additional things in here if you wanted to, like add-ons or donations if you're a nonprofit. So there's different ways of creating different checkout experiences. But what we've just seen here is a fairly typical one, and at least just gives you a flavor for what's going on there. So let's imagine that I've now registered. I'm now in there as an attendee. I have an invoice. I'll get an email confirming access. I can, if you had add-ons, I could add some additional add-ons later on if I wanted to. I can even add additional talks to my schedule if I forgot to. So there's a lot you can still do as an attendee before you even get there. But let's now switch into the dashboard and just give you a glimpse of some of the things that I recommend most new customers kind of just looking at and focusing on with their first few events. So ironically, let's just start from the reverse. Since we've just done the registration and we've looked at those custom questions, let's just look at a report that pulls out some of those questions we were just answering. So these questions here: how do you identify yourself? Creator, entrepreneur, freelancer. If we go to the audience insights, we automatically show that in graph form to show you total numbers and what that represents as a percentage. So straight away, you can kind of get a sense as to the demographic breakdown, the segments of your audience. And what's even cooler here is that, and we'll look at this in a moment, you can invite your speakers to their own private dashboard if you want to, totally up to you. They're not invited by default. And if you do that, they get to manage their own bio and headshot and talk description and all that sort of stuff. But you can also share with them a snapshot of this report that we're looking at here now with your speaker, but uniquely only for the attendees that registered for their individual event. So they are never looking at the full picture. So you can be confident as the organizer that we're just giving them a snapshot, even though you might know that, hang on, if I look at the data, 99% of people registered for theirs, compared to the entire event, they will never know what the total event actually was or the total numbers actually were. They just can see this. And time again, we will have speakers who will come back to us and say, I was preparing my talk for so-and-so's event, and I saw the data, and I had thought, if we look at this data here, I thought that I was talking to freelancers. And actually, when I looked at the data, they were much more likely to be entrepreneurs. And so I just tweaked the language and the content of my talk, and it just went down so much more impactfully. So, and these are just ways that you as the organizer can make your speaker look great, but also make yourselves look great as well, and makes you look really professional. And speakers love it, and they rave about the organizer running the event. They go, that was so professional, it was so great, I had all this data at my fingertips. So that's really great. So I would recommend having a look at that. So what does Hey Summit do high level? Analytics is the first one. We just looked at some of the data there. The first thing you'll probably start doing and gamifying it a little bit and getting sort of glued to the screen, if you will, once you start promoting, is where is your traffic coming from? What are the conversion rates? How much revenue are you making? Which talks were the most popular when booking, which is quite cool. And remember, I was talking about before the ability to sort of understand the content that people consumed. Well, actually, we break it into 3 categories, and it's all done through this section here, or at least the top 5 of them anyway. We've got 3 options. Talk registrations, which is really saying at the point of registration, which talks were the most popular, which ones were the most frequently selected or chosen, added to their schedule during registration. And this is interesting because this gives you a sense of intent. And as you know, we've just had an election here in the UK, and they'll do polls before the election, and it's only just to get people's intention before they actually go to vote. And quite often they're similar, but often they're not. And it's quite interesting to look at what did people come here thinking they would wanted to see versus what did they actually see. And so the talk registration tells you what they booked or what they added to their schedule, whereas the live and the replays one will tell you which ones they actually watched live, which ones did they bother to turn up to live. And it's, you know, actually the dark side of that slide I was looking at before around the trends in the marketplace and the fact that we're in this crazy new world where everyone's just so familiar with remote learning and on-demand video and virtual events. Actually, the downside of that, ironically, is that you will get, it's just nature of the beast now, you will get far fewer people watching the live broadcast than you will watching the replay. People are just so familiar and they expect in many ways that there will be a replay at some point, and they'll just watch it at their leisure. And sometimes it's with the best intentions. They will go, yeah, I'm going to watch all those live. And then the day arrives and they're just too busy. And they just know that it's an online event. There will be a replay. So just know that you will get much smaller numbers here. For most cases, there are always exceptions, of course. But we can contrast that with the replays and look at who watched those and everything else. This is a demo event, so this is stupidly small because we're doing what I did before, which was registering a fake attendee. So we've got a lot of registrations and very few people actually watching them. But you will always get more people on the replays, I think, than on the live. This also plays into our advantage if we think about pricing strategy. If we know that people are going to expect a replay, and if we've decided from the get-go that we're going to price our event at some point, the clever thing to do, or the sensible thing to do, is to make the live broadcasts free and to do the replays paid. It sometimes, until you think about it, feels unintuitive or counterintuitive, because you think, well, actually, hang on, the live thing surely is the higher value thing. And yet, as we just discovered, for most people, the live thing is just, well, obviously you're going to do it live, but I'll watch the replay, and so the real valuable bit is the replay. So if you are going to charge for that, knowing that a lot of people will want to do that. So reporting, all baked in. Where did traffic come from? And if you do clever things like UTM parameters, if you're doing paid ads, all that sort of stuff, we'll track those as well and help you understand which paid ads did better, which UTM parameters, which URL parameters, that sort of thing as well. And we'll also track affiliate commissions, or affiliate referrals, I should say, and then also speaker referrals as well. So if you share specific URLs with your speakers, which we generate for you, and if they share it, we'll help you understand which speakers brought in the most traffic, etc. So analytics, cool, does 99% of what you're going to need, and it's out of the box, nothing you need to do, it just works. But if you want to add your own Fathom or Google Analytics or whatever tool you use, you can drop in any JavaScript as well. So yeah, you're not locked in, but for most people, you don't even have to think about it, and it's just out of the box. Setup, I'm actually just going to skim over because there's obviously a lot of nitty-gritty depth in here, but just know that there's a lot you can tweak and change right through from localization. So what is the time zone? What is the date format? UK versus US. I know we do things differently in terms of date format. So you can do that. Billing details. Do you want to show your tax details on your invoices? Do you want to tweak how the registration works? So we were looking at before about whether you want people to be able to build their own schedule or not. You can toggle that on and off. There's a whole bunch of things that you can do in there, as well as custom domain, payment methods. So connecting your Stripe or PayPal. We have integrations with your most popular CRMs and email platforms like ConvertKit and HubSpot, and a whole bunch of things you can do. I won't go into too much depth on those, but obviously if there are any questions, let me know. Emails are obviously, I think, the lifeblood of pretty much any event, and talks to that kind of engagement piece we were looking at before in those earlier slides. And I guess the key takeaway from this is that you just need to know that out of the box, best practice event templates are preloaded into your event, ready to go. Nothing you need to do. It's just ready to go. Safe. There's no weird language in there. It's all perfectly safe and best practice sort of stuff, ranging from your cart abandonment emails to payment receipts, confirmations, talk reminders, wrap up emails, all that sort of stuff. But for most people, you're just going to check it. You're going to just let it run. But for the best events, they will just spend that extra half an hour just scanning through. And even though it's safe to send, there's always high value, I would feel, in making a small tweak, adding your personal language into there. If you like to say howdy at the beginning of an email, change it. Don't just leave it as hi. Take the time just to get it in there. And in some cases, take the time to even ask yourself whether you want that email in the first place. There's nothing wrong with, even though they're best practice in inverted quotes, you will know best practice as far as your audience is concerned more than best practice on a universal scale will be. And so if you don't want to send a particular ticket, just turn it off. And we toggle it off here and we can turn it on and off. So totally up to you what you want to do. But just know we handle all of that for you. You can send yourself tests. You can edit content. Rich text editor. You can do all the things that you would expect, drop in images, buttons, links, that sort of thing. But we have a couple of styles of emails or different use cases of emails is probably the better way to think about it. We have transactional emails, which is everything I've just spoken about, templates and all that sort of stuff, the automatic stuff that just gets sent unless you turn it off. But then we have on top of that, and this is only for our top plan. So I won't labor on it because I don't want to have people think that I'm talking about things that are on our pro plan, because that's just not what this talk is about. But we do also have the ability for broadcast and auto messages, so one-off messages where you can kind of create sequences and more targeted emails around people who purchased that particular ticket, or maybe if we do that UTM tracking, people who signed up through that UTM parameter or came to us from that speaker, so you can get a bit more granular. But for most people, all you'll need is the transactional, and that's all good to go. And of course, you can do things like you can set up your own sending addresses if you want. So you'll have a private and unique email address generated for you as part of your Hey Summit event. And of course, your from name and your reply to address will be your own. But the actual address it's sent from will be a unique Hey Summit email address by default. But you can, of course, swap that out with your own sending domain. So you can completely tie it in with your own domain if you want to. But just be careful, especially since March, which is where we are now. We are post-March, which is in a world where Gmail, Yahoo, and pretty much all of the other email providers have clamped down a lot on mass sending emails and just making sure that the basics are in place in terms of boring stuff now, alert, but DKIM sort of SPF records, DMARC records. These are DNS records that talk to the validity and the origin and the provenance of your email. If you don't know what those things are, and you don't have access to a developer to just, it's not like a developer needs to do anything, but if you don't have access to someone technically minded to set up those DNS records for you, don't play around with custom email domains because you risk none of your emails arriving in their inbox. We spend time making sure that our email sending has a high reputation and everything else. Now, if you do know what you're doing, fantastic. I would always recommend doing it if you can, because it just makes it feel a bit more connected to your brand. But just be careful. You can trip up if you're not careful. So here we are now in the content bit, and this is the bit that is the most fun, I think, because this is where you get to really decide how you're going to craft the delivery of the content within your event. The most important thing we think about here is the talks. Now, you might think about them as sessions or workshops or training tutorials or whatever you want to call them. And by the way, any wording that you see here, particularly on the front end, you can change entirely at the event level. So if you don't want to refer to a talk as a talk and you want to refer to it as a session, you can just change that. And then anywhere that the attendee previously would have seen the word talk, they will now see the word session. So feel free to mix and match. But for the purpose of this, I will refer to it as a talk. And we get to decide how we want that talk or the talks within my event to be delivered. So let's imagine we've got a single day event with 5 talks, 9 a.m., 10 a.m., 11 a.m., so on. Now, what we might do is say, well, actually, I want my 9 a.m., because it's the first one, it's going to be the kickoff event. I want that to be live, and I want that to be done over Zoom, because I want to do, it's just a quick way for me to go live. And I know my audience, they already have Zoom installed. So I'm going to do the 9 a.m. over Zoom. And then maybe at 10 a.m., Bob is speaking, and Bob's reached out to me a month ago saying, look, I'm getting married. I really want to do the event, but I'm going to be on my honeymoon during the event. Is there anything we can do? And so he sends me a pre-recorded video instead. And so the 10 a.m. will be a pre-recorded video. We could still mix it and match it with our chat, Q&A, and polling. So you as the host can still turn up live and say, hey, how's everyone doing? You can chat in the chat, get people excited, do a live question. But the video itself will be delivered as a pre-recorded video, albeit it will only go live at the time that you specify. So for all intents and purposes, the attendee will consume it as though it is live. That's quite cool. And then, of course, maybe you're 11 a.m. Am I on 11 now? 9, 10, 11. You get back to your Zoom, maybe you do it a different way. So just know it's down to you to kind of mix and match. But you don't have to. You can do, if you want to keep things simple and sane, just stick with one delivery mechanism and do that for the whole thing. But just know that you can mix and match. And it's as simple as going in here, editing a talk or creating a new one. And on the broadcast tab, which is the very first thing we do, is just going, right, how do we want to deliver this talk? Is it a live webinar? Is it a live stream? Or is it pre-recorded? So a live webinar, we now want to choose the provider that we want to use. So let's go for Zoom webinar or a Zoom meeting, for example. If you want to do breakout rooms, that can be quite cool. Or if it's a live stream, do we want to go for YouTube Live? These are all the live streams, and they'll be completely embedded within your Hey Summit event. StreamYard is a popular Zoom alternative that lives in the browser, which can be quite nice. And then pre-recorded, we've got a wider selection, all of the usual culprits, YouTube, Vimeo, Wistia being the most popular, I would suggest. And you're just linking them up. And then the rest of it is just information about the talk. So the title, the description, and you can make that as long as you want, rich text, links, link it to categories, link it to a stage if you want to. Of course, choose the date and time. So this is where you say, this goes at 9, the next one's at 10, etc., which is quite cool. But what's really nice, again, going back to that bit I was talking about before, where you can invite speakers. If you are doing a slightly larger event, and I would say anything more than 10, and you don't, or you haven't yet thought about the timings of those talks, and you're not too glued to them being done in a certain order, and you don't want the stress of having to do it yourself, what you can do is actually remove this. And this is actually when you first set up a talk, it's probably an easier version of this. You can, let's just go to this 1 second. So what you can do is say, no, I don't have a date. And if you don't say you have a date yet, you can actually do this for one of two of these reasons. One, because you literally don't have a date yet, and you're going to put everything else in the date, sorry, the speaker, the description, the title, and then later on you'll come and put the date in. Or it's because you want to throw that over to the speaker. And so this is a really nice sort of bit of advice, a pro tip, if you will. If you are going to invite your speakers to their own dashboard, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute, so that they can then update their bio and everything else, if you select this option here, you can actually empower your speaker to choose their preferred time slot. And all we need to do is head over to the setup area here, over to speaker settings, and we're going to say, yes, we want them to be able to choose their own time slot. When is your event running? So you choose your dates. So we can say between this date and this date. When do the time slots run? So we say, let's say from 9 a.m. through to 5 p.m. And then how long is each slot on average? Let's say 60 minutes. And do you want a gap in between? So for toilet break, or just in case there's overrunning, 15 minutes. And so now what we'll do is we'll generate those pre-allocated slots. And so when the speaker now logs into the dashboard, and they will be seeing the option, they will see the option to choose their preferred time slot. And once it's gone, it's gone. So if Bob chooses 9 a.m. and it's gone, then Jane going in will only see 10 a.m. onwards, for example, or 10:15 onwards. But crucially, they're only choosing their preferred time slot. So don't worry, you get the final say, obviously, as the organizer. So it's a request, essentially. Can I talk at 9 is what they're basically saying. And so you get to either reject it with a note or accept it. Once it's accepted, that is then locked in, and no one else will be able to select that slot. And indeed, even while it's in that limbo state, you haven't yet decided, other speakers won't be able to select that until you release it back into the pool, essentially. Really great, just to take that stress. My dad was a headmaster back, he's a retired headmaster, and one of the most stressful periods of his career each year was having to work out the academic schedule, the timetable every year, and work out, right, maths at 9 a.m. Well, hang on, if I do maths then English conflicts with it, and so on and so forth. It's just a similar thing if you're not careful with a slightly larger event. You will find that, hang on, how do I match these up now? So it can be really nice just to get that stress out of the way. So those are the talks. And while we're talking about that, let's just go over to the speakers now, and look at what we can do here. Now, by default, speakers will not be invited to log into their dashboard. That's a decision that you make on a per speaker basis. And the reason for that is that you might not want speakers to engage with your dashboard. You might want to be the gatekeeper, literally, for their title, their bio. You might want them to fill out a spreadsheet outside of the platform. Fill out your details here, and I'll get my team to add it to the event. Or you might just have a selection of high-profile VIP speakers, and you just know that they're not going to take the time. They're not going to bother logging into their dashboard. They expect you to do it for them. And so it's down to you to decide which ones you want to invite. And so we just simply click Send Login Details here, and that particular speaker will be sent an email. And of course, you can head over to the email section to modify that email if you just want to change the instruction a little bit to make it a bit more explicit, to say, hey, please don't forget to make the title a funny title because the theme of the event is XYZ. So if you want to give them particular instructions, you can do that. But most importantly, you can preview the dashboard before you invite them, as well as after you've invited them, but especially before, just to have a look at what they're going to be seeing, so that you can kind of make decisions about some settings that you might want to change, etc. So we can go in here. So let's look at Pat Flynn's, go into the speaker dashboard, and we can now see what they will see. Oh, let's click that by mistake. And we can see this is their dashboard here. So they can go in here and review and update their bio. This will be a shorter version of their bio. You get to update more than this, but they can change their name and their company and their title. They can change their bio with rich text and make it as long as they want, social links and all those sorts of things. They can put headshots and change it if they want to. They can put an intro video, additional images, do all those sorts of things. They can change their time zone. They can see how many attendees are booked in, and that insights and data that I was speaking about before, they get to see a version of that as well. So as they start getting traction and people start registering, they get to see what's going on here. And you'll notice that there's a download attendee data button here. This is off by default, but you can choose to turn it on for certain speakers if you want them to be able to download their own data, which can be quite cool. But this is down to you to do your own GDPR sort of compliance or whatever territory you're in, but as well as any sort of agreements you need to make with your speaker. We do the bare bones, if you will, which is just to have the speaker confirm that they're going to be responsible, that they will include an unsubscribe link, the basics. But I would always recommend that you maybe just get a quick contract with them if you're going to be sharing email addresses. But again, it's only for people who registered for their talk. So which might again be 99% of the attendees, or it might only be 5%, depending on how your event is run there. And so the speaker, can do all these sorts of things. They get their private share URLs. This is how we track referrals from a speaker. If you have paid tickets turned on and affiliate programs, then they'll get their affiliate code here as well. They can create offers and giveaways. They can look at swipe copy if you've added any media assets, a whole bunch of things depending on what you do. So it becomes a really nice hub for speakers to kind of feel connected to your events, but also empowered to get their profile looking as best as it possibly can, which can be really great. And it just makes them feel better throughout, but also by the end of the event as well. So I just want to show you one last thing really before I throw it over to Q&A, just the ticketing, because this is where there's a lot of flexibility, and as I mentioned, there's a lot of temptation to go to one of the extremes. And so I just want to show you a few of the options that you can play around with here. So if we head into revenue and tickets, you'll notice that if this is your first event, or if you just created a new event, you'll have a free access ticket. Every event needs at least one ticket. You can't watch anything as an attendee unless you have a ticket. So you have to have at least one ticket. The most basic of tickets is what we have here, which is it's free and they can access basically everything. So they can access the live broadcast, the replays. So let's just look at that ticket and see what it does, what it's actually doing. So we can give it a name. We can say there's only 100 of them if we want to. We don't have to, but we can. We can change the price. In this case, it's free, so there's only one price. We can change the restrictions. So do they get to watch the live broadcast, the replays, combination of that? Does it expire at a certain point? Because at the moment, it's not. It doesn't expire. They give access to everything. So let's imagine now that we're going to create a couple of tickets here. We're going to create a free ticket and then a paid ticket that gives you access to the replays. So this is the free ticket. So I'm just going to modify this. We're not going to say there's a limit. We're going to say it's unlimited. Keep it as free. And restrictions, we're going to just tick the live broadcast. So this only gives you access to the live broadcasts with this free ticket. Doesn't expire. That's it. So we'll save. I won't save it, but that's what we would do. And then for the next ticket, let's imagine now we're going in for the next ticket and we're going to create a VIP ticket. So what would that look like? So let's call this VIP. VIP pass or something like that. Again, you can do a maximum quantity if you want to. And instead of $0 for the price, let's say we're going to do $99. Now, what's cool about this pricing here is that you'll notice that we have a couple of things that you might want to think about. Availability, and then this add button here as well. So availability, first of all, is when is this individual price, so the $99 that we've just entered here, when is that price available for this ticket? So we have a VIP pass, and we have a price within that, $99. And at the moment, we're saying, yep, this ticket, this VIP pass is always $99 because availability is always. But what you might want to do is create some tiered pricing. And so we can go, well, actually, pre-event, let's say it's going to be $69. And then if we click the add here, we can create a second price. And we'll say, yep, during the event, it's going to go up to $99. And then post-event, it's going to go up to $149. So pre-event is anything up to the point when the event starts. During the event is up to the point when the last talk is broadcast, and then post-event is obviously from that point forwards. They're just predefined time blocks, really, just to save time, really. But you can go into a date range and just say, no, specifically from this date, I'm doing literally a Thanksgiving weekend promo. And so between this date and this date, we're going to do a special price. So you can create as many of these as you want. And Hey Summit will just automatically show the price or prices that you've made available based on the rules here. Now, in almost all cases, you will only ever want one price showing at a given time, because in most cases, you wouldn't want to have a 99 price and a 299 price at the same time, because it's for the same ticket. So you will literally have people always choosing the cheaper one. So just be careful, which is why we have these predefined blocks here. You will never get overlap if you do our own predefined blocks, but if you do date ranges, there is a risk that you overlap and then you have two prices showing at the same time. Easily fixed, but just be aware of that. Just double check it. But huge amount of flexibility there. So you can create some tier pricing, some promo pricing, really nice. And then with the restrictions, with the free, remember, we just had the live broadcast. With the paid, we're going to select all of them, because you might get some people only buying the VIP pass. So they should also be able to watch the live broadcast, obviously. And then you might get some people who get the free first and then upgrade later. So you just want to be mindful that there's a couple of different routes to getting that ticket. So you want to tick them all. Now, unless you've turned on in person, you won't actually see this in person option. It's off by default unless you say this event has an in person component. So, just in case you're wondering why that in person is showing there. And then we're not going to expire, but maybe you expire and you say, look, we're going to do this expires 49. In fact, one nice thing that people do is they will say with the free ticket in that scenario, if we go back here, they will expire it. So let's say it's again live broadcasts, but maybe we're going to give you access to the replays on the free ticket as well, even though we're going to have a paid ticket for the replays. And you might think, well, why would I do that? But actually, what you can do is pair that with the expiry and say, look, from each talk going live, 24 hours, in fact, after each talk going live, this ticket would expire. So yes, theoretically, you can watch with a free ticket any live broadcast and any replay, but only for the first 24 hours. So that technically means you can literally watch any live broadcast. But as far as the replays are concerned, it will only be possible to watch them for 24 hours after that thing, which so yeah, can be quite just lots of different ways of mixing and matching and playing around with ticketing strategy, which can be quite nice. And then you've got things like add-ons and donations as well to kind of just do some additional things in there as well. And we've got a coupon platform or system and affiliate program baked in as well. So you don't need to integrate with any external affiliate program. We have that baked in. You just choose your commissions and you have a sign up form where people can sign up. You can auto enroll your speakers to be affiliates, etc., etc. So yeah, that is probably about 5% of what Hey Summit does. And I think the thing to just remind people of as we sort of bring this bit to a close is just the reality of how different an event can be depending on what you're trying to achieve. And so my usual recommendation, if this is the first time using Hey Summit, is keep your first event simple. Give yourself every opportunity to learn as much as you can about the event, about your audience, about what worked, what didn't, etc., so that you'll have the encouragement and the data, crucially, to then do a different event, a tweaked event, an improved event the next time. And you'll find quite quickly that as you do your second and third event, not only are you more comfortable with Hey Summit and getting a bit more comfortable with some of those more advanced strategies, but you actually know which strategies are more in tune with what you're trying to achieve. And there we go. That's broadly speaking, sort of a whirlwind tour of Hey Summit and some of the things you might want to think about as you're setting them up. Let's switch over now to the Q&A portion and see what we have in there. If you haven't asked any questions, if anything's popping to mind, feel free to pop it in there now, and I'll make sure we get through as many of these as we can. Let's have a look.
But before
So,
we go to
sure.
Q&A, I gotta cut off the live stream. So you guys knew that some legend was coming. You found out it was Ben. He walked us through Hey Summit. You saw all the new things that has happened since Hey Summit has been about. If you're not here, oh, so sorry. But if you're here, you get to talk to Ben. But before we go, Benjamin, would you tell everyone where they could find you on social media?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, if you're watching this on the replay, you're not going to get the Q&A bit. So if you do have any questions, you can contact me, ben@heysummit.com. Happy to answer any questions. You can also go to heysummit.com and reach out to our support team, sign up for a free trial. Give us a go and let us know how we can be helpful. Socials, we're on twitter.com/heysummit. You can find us on all the main ones. We're mostly within our own sort of event world, so we don't do a huge amount on social. We probably should. Best way, if you have any questions, just reach out to one of our members in the support team, and we can help you out if you have any questions.
Right. So this has been an Event Innovators Insights Session with the Virtual Summiteers peer group, and we will see you next month for another virtual event session.